Phillip Island, Australia. The red garage of Ducati looks strangely quiet this weekend because for the first time this season, the familiar energy of Marc Marquez is missing. The 8-time world champion is still recovering from a serious shoulder blade fracture, an injury that has shaken both his fans and the Ducati camp. After a terrifying crash during the MotoGP Mandelica 2025, Marquez underwent surgery on his right scapula or shoulder blade on Monday, October 13. The operation was successful, but the road to recovery will not be quick. Doctors have advised a full rehabilitation period that could stretch up to 16 weeks, meaning his return this season remains uncertain. Ducati has now confirmed that Marquez will miss both the Australian and Malaysian Grand Prix, two races that come just 1 week apart. While fans were hoping for a miracle comeback, Ducati has chosen compassion over pressure. "There is no need to rush," said Davide Tardozzi, Ducati Lenovo team manager. "We want Marc back only when he's 100% fit. We'll wait as long as it takes." Those words carry a deep emotional weight. It's not just about missing a rider, it's about losing the heartbeat of a team. Marquez's presence inside the Ducati box has transformed the squad since his arrival. His feedback, determination, and data on the Desmosedici GP25 have often been the key reference for other riders, including Francesco Bagnaia. Without him, Ducati looks less certain, less complete. Yet Tardozzi insists that the team will not sacrifice Marquez's health for short-term gains. "We'll see in a few weeks after his next medical checkup," Tardozzi explained. "Our hope is to have Marc back in Valencia for the final race of the season, but if he's not ready, we'll wait. His physical recovery matters more than anything else." Behind those statements lies a painful truth. Marquez's injury could effectively end his 2025 season. Spanish sports doctor Pedro Luis Ripoll shared his medical perspective earlier this week, predicting that the injury might require up to 4 months of rest before the rider can return to full strength. "A scapular fracture is delicate," Ripoll said. "It involves both bone and muscular recovery. For a MotoGP rider, that means months of careful rehabilitation." For Ducati, it's a bittersweet moment. The team had finally built its dream lineup, the combination of Marc Marquez and Francesco Bagnaia, two world champions united in red. Their chemistry brought Ducati its golden era, dominating most of the 2025 season. But fate, once again, has tested Marquez's resilience. Fans who have followed his career know this feeling all too well. Marquez has fought through countless injuries before, broken arms, dislocations, surgeries, yet he always came back stronger. His story is one of pain and perseverance. Now, as the paddock moves on to Australia and Malaysia without him, everyone wonders, will the baby alien rise again in Valencia? Whether he returns this season or not, one thing is certain. Marc Marquez's spirit continues to drive Ducati forward. His determination has already changed the team's culture, and even in recovery, his influence remains powerful. As Tardozzi summarized it emotionally, Marc doesn't need to prove anything anymore. What matters now is that he heals completely. When he's back, he'll be stronger, like he always is. For now, the red seat waits, empty but full of hope, for the return of its fearless warrior.
In a heartfelt and emotional reflection, MotoGP legend Jorge Lorenzo has paid a glowing tribute to Marc Marquez, calling him a mental monster after the Spaniard's stunning return to the top of world motorcycling. The 32-year-old Marquez ended his 6-year title drought last month, securing his 7th Premier Class World Championship at the Japanese Grand Prix. It marked the completion of one of the greatest comeback stories in MotoGP history, a journey that began with a devastating injury in 2020 and an incredibly risky move away from Honda in 2023. After years of frustration with an uncompetitive Honda RC213V, Marquez made the bold decision to join Gresini Racing Ducati in 2024. Riding a one-year-old Desmosedici, he instantly proved his brilliance still burned bright, taking multiple podiums, 11 Grand Prix victories, and 14 sprint wins since the Indonesian GP. His consistency and raw speed were enough to convince the Ducati Lenovo team to sign him for 2025, a move that led directly to his return to world champion status. For Jorge Lorenzo, who knows Marquez better than most, this achievement hits deep. The two Spaniards were fierce rivals throughout the 2010s. Marquez famously dethroned Lorenzo in 2013 during his rookie season, sparking one of MotoGP's most intense eras. Later, in 2019, the two briefly became teammates at Repsol Honda, though Lorenzo struggled with injuries and retired at the end of that season. Speaking to TNT Sport during the Indonesian Grand Prix weekend, Lorenzo couldn't hide his admiration for the man who once stood on the opposite side of his battles. "It's unbelievable," Lorenzo said, visibly impressed. "The strength in his mind, his mental power, it's just incredible. He's strong physically, mentally, and technically. Marc is a complete rider." Lorenzo continued by describing Marquez's career as almost mathematical, a perfect formula of talent, intelligence, and persistence that leads inevitably to victory. "As I've always said, anyone who joins MotoGP in their rookie season and wins the world title immediately has something special. He's still the best at 32 years old, and now with the best bike, the results are just mathematics." That single word, mathematics, perfectly sums up the essence of Marc Marquez. His approach to racing has always combined precise calculation with fearless aggression. Even after suffering one of the worst injuries in MotoGP history, Marquez never gave up. Instead, he rebuilt himself, physically, mentally, and emotionally, until he was ready to conquer again. In 2025, Marquez not only returned to the top, but did it in dominant fashion, silencing critics who once said he was finished. His story has now become a symbol of mental resilience, proving that champions aren't just born, they're forged through pain, perseverance, and the refusal to quit. Lorenzo's respect captures what the entire MotoGP paddock feels: admiration for a rider who redefined the limits of human endurance and mental strength. Marc Marquez isn't just back, he's rewritten what a comeback means in MotoGP.
Dani Pedrosa, saddened by Bezzecchi's costly mistake that injured Marc Marquez at Mandelica. When the lights went out at the Mandalika Grand Prix 2025, fans expected a fierce battle between the world's fastest riders, but what unfolded shocked the entire MotoGP paddock. The thrilling weekend that began with Marco Bezzecchi's spectacular sprint victory ended in heartbreak and controversy after the Aprilia rider collided with Marc Marquez in the main race, leaving the Ducati star injured and the MotoGP world stunned. Dani Pedrosa's emotional reaction. Former MotoGP legend and current KTM test rider Dani Pedrosa couldn't hide his disappointment. Speaking after the race, Pedrosa expressed deep regret over the incident, saying he felt genuinely sad for what happened between Marquez and Bezzecchi. Pedrosa praised Bezzecchi's incredible pace throughout the weekend in Mandelica, describing him as one of the strongest riders on the grid after a stunning comeback in the sprint race. Bezzecchi had dropped positions early in the sprint, but displayed impressive determination to fight his way to victory, overtaking one rider after another in a performance that left fans cheering. That was the Marco Bezzecchi we all wanted to see: fast, fearless, and smart. But unfortunately, what happened on Sunday painted a completely different picture. The costly mistake at turn 7. Just a few laps into the main race, Bezzecchi made a desperate move at turn 7, trying to overtake Marquez on the inside. It was a risky section of the Mandelica circuit, narrow, downhill, and known for unpredictable grip. As Bezzecchi lunged in, his front wheel clipped the rear of Marquez's Ducati, Both riders went down hard, sliding into the gravel. Marquez was seen clutching his wrist in visible pain. Race marshals quickly rushed in, but the damage was done. The crash not only ended both riders' races, it also left Marquez with a serious wrist injury, ruling him out of the next 2 MotoGP rounds in Australia and Malaysia. For Pedrosa, that was the most painful part to witness. He didn't need to take that risk so early on. It was just the beginning of the race. He had the pace to fight for the podium later. It's a shame because his weekend had been so strong. A lesson in patience and racecraft. MotoGP analysts echoed Pedrosa's thoughts. The data showed that Bezzecchi's entry speed into turn 7 was 3 kilometers faster than Marquez's, leaving him with no room to brake or adjust. Experts argue that in situations like this, patience often makes the difference between victory and disaster. For Marquez, the injury is another setback in what has been a season full of highs and lows. The Ducati rider had been fighting near the top of the standings, but this crash may cost him valuable championship points. Meanwhile, Bezzecchi, who many considered a rising star after his sprint heroics, now faces criticism and possible review from the MotoGP stewards panel for reckless and dangerous riding. A weekend of triumph and tragedy. It's ironic how this same circuit that gave Bezzecchi one of his most emotional sprint wins also became the scene of his biggest mistake. Fans across social media described it as a weekend of glory turned to regret. Pedrosa summed it up best. Marco is a talented rider, no question, but talent must be balanced with patience. Sometimes waiting one more lap can change everything. As MotoGP moves to Phillip Island next weekend, all eyes will be on whether Bezzecchi can redeem himself and how quickly Marc Marquez can recover from this painful blow. For now, Mandelica 2025 will be remembered as one of the most emotional and heartbreaking chapters of this MotoGP season.
The Mandalika Grand Prix turned from glory to disaster in just one lap. What was supposed to be another strong weekend for Ducati became a heartbreaking Sunday as Marc Marquez suffered a brutal crash after a reckless move by Marco Bezzecchi. The 2025 MotoGP Indonesia, held at the 4.3-kilometer Mandalika International Circuit, once again proved cruel to the baby alien. Starting from 9th on the grid, Marquez was determined to fight back through the pack, but his race ended before it truly began. As the riders charged into turn 7 on the opening lap, Bezzecchi, riding for Aprilia, dived aggressively down the inside. The Italian attempted a daring overtake, but his front wheel clipped Marquez's Ducati, sending the world champion flying into the gravel trap. The impact was violent. Marquez was thrown into the air before tumbling across the rough surface, landing hard on his right shoulder. Camera footage showed Marquez grimacing in pain as he tried to stand, clutching his arm. Bezzecchi, too, went down, though he escaped with minor injuries. The crowd at Mandelica fell silent, aware that something serious had just happened. Following immediate medical checks and later scans at the Ruber International Hospital in Madrid, doctors confirmed that Marquez had a small fracture at the base of his scapula, shoulder blade, and ligament damage in his right shoulder. Fortunately, surgery is not required, but the 7-time world champion will need several weeks of rest and physiotherapy. As a result, Marquez will miss at least 2 races, the Australian GP and the Malaysian GP, as Ducati prioritizes his full recovery. If all goes well, he could make a comeback at the Portugal GP and the season finale in Valencia, Spain. This incident is a devastating blow for Ducati, especially after Marquez had just secured the 2025 MotoGP World Championship. Losing their top rider right after such a monumental victory leaves a deep emotional scar on the team. Claudio Domenicali speaks out. Ducati CEO Claudio Domenicali didn't stay silent. Speaking to Motosan, Domenicali expressed both admiration and frustration.
acknowledging Bezzecchi's raw speed, yet criticizing his lack of patience. He said, "I think Bezzecchi had a fantastic weekend, running up front with incredible pace. He showed he was one of the fastest riders, but he needed to think a little longer and wait. I believe he was too impatient." Domenicali's words carried both disappointment and subtle warning. In MotoGP, ambition and aggression are essential, but there's a thin line between bravery and recklessness. At turn 7, Bezzecchi crossed that line. Replays revealed that his braking point was far too deep, causing the front tire to lose grip slightly. At nearly 140 kilometers an hour, even a minor misjudgment can turn into disaster. The impact with Marquez's Ducati was inevitable, and the outcome catastrophic. A heavy price for Ducati. For Ducati, this incident means more than losing a rider. It's losing momentum, data, and leadership inside the garage. Marquez's unique riding style, especially his late braking mastery, has been crucial for Ducati's technical development this season. Without him, Ducati's engineers lose their primary feedback loop, and the emotional void in the paddock is undeniable. Marquez's presence often lifts the entire team. His absence will test their resilience. Meanwhile, Bezzecchi issued a brief apology on social media, calling it a racing incident. But for Ducati fans, it's hard to forgive what looks like an avoidable mistake that cost their champion both pain and time off the track. As the championship heads to the next rounds, all eyes will be on Marquez's recovery and Ducati's response. Will the baby alien return in full force, or will Mandelica's curse strike again? One thing is certain, this crash will be remembered as one of the most emotional and controversial moments of the 2025 season.
The main race of the 2025 MotoGP Mandelica once again turned into a theater of chaos, controversy, and heartbreak. What was expected to be a tense but fair battle under the blazing Lombok sun instead delivered one of the most shocking crashes of the season. Marc Marquez, who had been struggling all weekend at the Mandalika International Circuit, started the race from 9th on the grid. Despite his difficulties, the 8-time world champion was determined to bring home valuable points. Fans were eager to see whether he could turn the tide after days of setbacks, but destiny had a cruel script written for the Spaniard. On lap 1, at the tricky turn 7, disaster struck. Marco Bezzecchi of Aprilia forced an impossible move from behind, colliding with Marquez in a violent crash that instantly ended the race for both riders. The crowd gasped in disbelief as the two bikes tangled and slid out, leaving both men sprawled in the gravel. Ducati course manager Gigi Dall'Igna could not contain his anger. The Italian boss, who has been instrumental in Ducati's dominance over recent years, was visibly furious in the paddock after the incident. In interviews, his voice trembled with frustration as he blasted Bezzecchi for what he called a reckless and unnecessary maneuver. "There was no room, absolutely no chance for that overtake," Dall'Igna exclaimed. Marc was holding his line, and yet Bezzecchi forced his way where no space existed. It's unacceptable at this level of racing, especially when the stakes are so high. The situation grew even more dramatic when medical reports confirmed that Marc Marquez had suffered a fractured shoulder, a devastating blow for Ducati's title hopes. The baby alien, who just recently found his form again, now faces weeks, perhaps months of recovery. To make matters worse, reigning world champion Francesco Bagnaia also crashed out later in the race, marking a double disaster for Ducati. The reigning king of MotoGP, who was aiming for vital championship points, suffered a heartbreaking DNF that left the garage in stunned silence. Fans around the world poured their emotions onto social media, with many sympathizing with Marquez and criticizing Bezzecchi's move as too aggressive and desperate. For Ducati supporters, it was a nightmare scenario. Both of their star riders out of the Mandalika GP and their team principal fuming in disbelief. The Mandalika circuit, famous for its unpredictable nature, once again lived up to its reputation as a track that gives no mercy.
Instead of celebrating a triumph, Ducati left Indonesia with broken dreams and bitter memories. Whether Bezzecchi will face further penalties from race direction remains to be seen, but one thing is clear: Gigi Dagna and Ducati Corse will not let this incident go quietly. The championship battle has now taken a dramatic new turn, and the fallout from this crash will echo long after the dust in Mandelica has settled.